Open us up there, sir.
Yes, sir. Lord God, we thank you for the opportunity for us to meet together tonight, Lord. I pray that we'll understand that it's not exactly everyone's able to meet this way, and there are several believers around the globe who don't have the opportunity for it. Lord, I pray that we will redeem the time that we have here tonight, that we take away what you have to show for Brother Herb to show us tonight, Lord, and we boldly go out of here ready to share the work with others. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so what we're going to do tonight is we are going to do a review on Daniel 8 and 9, which is the 70 weeks prophecy, which is going to open up with Daniel chapter 8. We'll just go through that, and remember I told you before that the verses or the chapters in Daniel aren't chronological, like 1 came first and then 5 came after that and then 7 came after that. So Daniel 8, basically, just a little bit of a synopsis, gives us, Daniel's vision of the Antichrist, who he calls the little horn, which affects him so dramatically, it causes him to be sick for several days. And I'm comparing it in our study tonight to Revelation chapter 19, which is the chapter that, of course, gives us the second coming of Christ. And so Daniel, he's really the Old Testament corollary to what New Testament prophet that we have.
Revelation.
Yeah, John and the book of Revelation. That's exactly right. 600 years apart, but the same vision. The distinction was when Daniel wrote his prophecies down, he was told to do what with the prophecies?
Shut it up.
Yep, seal up the
Seal
book,
up the book.
because the time was
Not yet.
not yet. But John was told, in contrast, what?
Do not seal the book.
Do not seal up the book, because
The time is here.
the time is, as English says, not near, but at hand. It's already here. And so that's the distinction we have between John and Daniel. But Daniel gives us in chapter 8 the beginning of a rise of the Antichrist, and John in Revelation 19 gives us his end. So let's go ahead, Ingrid, and have you start out with Daniel chapters 23 through 27.
Chapter, okay.
8, I'm sorry, verses 23 through 27.
Okay.
Daniel 8, 23 to 27.
Okay. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper, and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of people, the prince of princes, but he shall also be broken without hand. That was 20 to 27, you said? Sorry.
Yep.
And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it.
Okay, so we see Daniel getting this strange vision of what this entity he calls the little horn, and at the end of it he's told, shut up the vision because this is going to be for many days down the road. In other words, he's looking down the prophetic timeline to the last 7 years of human history just prior to the second coming of Christ. And since it was so far in advance, in essence, it was 2,600 years in advance, he was told, shut up the vision. In other words, I'm not going to give you the detailed interpretation of that vision because the time is not yet at hand. And it made him sick. He was so disturbed about it that, he got sick for several days and had to take time off from work. But we find, right? I mean, that's interesting. We find out in verse 23 that this Antichrist will be a king of fierce countenance, meaning his stern face, and he understands dark sentences. What does that mean?
Sorcery.
Yeah, this is where we get the Yeah, exactly. This is where we get the term, the Prince of Darkness is one of the names for the Antichrist is oftentimes, referred to by, and I remember looking at my concordance once, and I was like, Prince of Dark, tried to find it. I was like, it's not in here. What madness be this? I read a whole book that was titled The Prince of Darkness about the Antichrist, and I couldn't find the verse, and I was like, was this not biblical? But it's basically the interpretation or a different way of expressing the phrase the prince who understands dark sentences. He's a guy who's this king is well versed in the occultic arts, and we know that because it says a little bit later on that he shall be mighty, but it won't be by his own power. Who gives him this power to become this great world ruler?
Satan.
The devil, Satan. Exactly. That's exactly right. And he shall destroy wonderfully, it says. That doesn't mean that, destroying people is a good thing. It just means that it's going to be awesome. Like, oh my gosh, this is amazing how many people he's able to kill in such a short period of time. And shall prosper, this king. And he says, and practice. And shall destroy the mighty and holy people. These are the tribulation saints that will be, remember, put to death during the 70th week of Daniel. There's no supernatural protection for the church or for the tribulation saints in the sense that you have in the church era. Even though Christians are killed during the church era, we don't find the church being overcome and basically defeated by the powers of Satan. And it says in verse 25 specifically that through his policy, he shall cause craft to prosper. What type of craft is he talking about? Macrame?
Church craft.
Okay, right. He's not going to impose, knitting for everyone from grammar school onward. No. He is going to, by his official governmental policy, impose the practice of witchcraft upon everyone that's part of his kingdom. And that's an interesting thing, He's actually going to have witchcraft as part of his political platform. And we go on to find out at the tail end of verse 25 that he will stand up even against who? Prince of Princes is none other than Jesus. And it says, but he shall be what, Ingrid?
He should be broken without hand.
He will be broken without hand. In other words, human beings won't be involved in the defeat of the Antichrist, which is why it's pointless. And I hear so many people talking about, we need to rally together, and if we do, we store up gold and get enough guns and defend our right to bear arms, we can kill the Antichrist. That's actually not the case, because the Bible says he's not going to be defeated by a military uprising. He's going to be the one doing the defeating all of the military uprisings against him. But it's going to be Jesus that comes and breaks him without human hand being involved. And it says, when he stands up against the Prince of Princes, he'll be broken without hand. And then Daniel gets sick for many days because of this vision. Oh, so go ahead, Mark.
In my Bible here, where it says that he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many, my Bible replaces peace with prosperity, which is interesting because if you're going to destroy many by prosperity, it kind of fits into our whole society and prosperity gospel, and I don't know. I mean, it's kind of strange that we're talking about him destroying many by prosperity.
What version do you have?
25? Oh, the version? It's the King James.
Anyway,
it's some version of the King James, but it takes out the word.
What verse are you looking at?
25.
Okay,
And it says, he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by prosperity shall destroy many.
Okay, now my King James says, by peace.
Mine has both, but yeah.
You don't have both.
It's peace is underlined, and then down below it has prosperity as being
Your King James version, the King James version of the Bible says peace.
Says
What
peace.
your Bible has, it's a study Bible. It includes notes. Like in my outlines, you'll see that I put in bold the scriptures, and then in non-bold, I'll put my commentary. All that is editor's commentary, saying that an ultimate translation of this word might be prosperity, but the King James version actually says.
No, it says peace. It's underlined, and you go down below. It says prosperity.
All I'm telling you is what that means. It doesn't mean that it can't be both. There's one Hebrew word there, and in the King James translation, which was the 1611 translation into English, it was translated peace. in parentheses or below or as a note or commentary in your Bible, the editor is saying that this verse or word could be translated prosperity.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Well, yeah, I thought you were saying that your King James.
No. I'm just saying it shows as their alternate
All right.
translation could be translated as prosperity. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. All right. So the majority of traditional Bible scholars translate that verse or interpret that word peace as meaning that the Antichrist will use the peace process, United Nations negotiations and the like, to enter into what? An agreement for how long?
7 years.
7-year peace treaty. A 7-year peace treaty that will be broken at what point?
In the midst.
In the midst of the 7-year peace treaty. So I go with the King James translation that word from the Hebrew, Daniel's written in Hebrew and Aramaic, that should be translated peace because it says by peace he shall destroy many. What does that mean? That means that by having Israel, which has one of the most powerful militaries in the world now, and has the nuclear bomb, but they stand down from using their Samson option, and Samson option is like, hey, if you're going to invade our land and take our land, we'll release the nukes and we'll all get blown up together, and everybody's going to die. But they are, caused to forbear or restrain themselves from the Samson option by engaging in this 7-year peace treaty with the Antichrist, which allows them, most importantly, to do what thing?
To control whatever he wants to do during this period of time?
Well, but most importantly, the 7-year peace treaty, many Bible scholars believe, and I believe, gives Israel the right to do what thing that's critical to Bible prophecy?
Rebuild the temple.
Rebuild the temple, which does not stand, right? The first temple was destroyed by whom?
Herod? No, rebuilt by Herod.
Right.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, good. All right. And the second temple that was rebuilt by King Herod was later destroyed by whom?
The
Romans.
The Romans. That's right. Bonus point. What year?
You know this.
70 AD.
70 AD. That's exactly right. This is encouraging. See, we know this stuff, man. We know this stuff. I'm telling you, you go to the average church pastor and start asking these questions, he's gonna be looking at you like, well, we did in seminary, we didn't cover that.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. We studied hermeneutics. Yeah, that's exactly right. 70 AD. So the peace treaty will be a feature, and a feature of that peace treaty will Israel having the right to rebuild the temple. I think Mark, you were saying a couple weeks ago about the lamb, the cow.
The announcement on the Temple Institute Facebook page turned out to be that they, rather than waiting for this perfect red heifer to spontaneously, naturally appear, they decided to start a breeding program for red heifers in Israel, and they're raising money for it right now so they can create one on their own timeline so that they can be ready to build the temple whenever they want and not have to wait for this red heifer just to show up spontaneously.
Now, I was under the impression they had already actually accomplished that. Did they speak to that?
They had a red heifer that they picked out, and that became about naturally. And as far as I know, they're still examining that as being a possible candidate, but they're not going to wait, I guess, to see if it qualifies or wait for something else that might come up. They're just going to start breeding them until they get one that's what they want. That way they can hurry the process up and make it happen quickly so they don't have to wait.
Okay. So, all right. So we find out, that the temple will be rebuilt as part of the Antichrist peace treaty of 7 years, which is the same length of time as a very important time period that we're going to talk about in Daniel chapter 9, which is known as what?
70th week of
There you have it, the 70th week. The 70 weeks of Daniel is divided up, to get ahead of ourselves a little bit, into 2 sections, and we'll talk about those 2 sections, which are the first 69 weeks of years and the 70th week of years. Okay, but before we get to Daniel 9, let's go to Revelation 19 and see how John looks at this same period of time, this rise of the Antichrist. So Phil, if you would, read for us Revelation chapter 19, verses 11 through 21.
And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he does judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. And he quitteth the wine priests of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God. 18, 17,
Yeah, go ahead and read through 21.
21. That ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bound, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and the armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, which with he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh.
Okay, so this entity that Daniel calls the little horn is called by John what? What's the title he uses here to describe the same person?
It was,
It says, and I saw
At least.
the beast, Steve. So John refers to the Antichrist as the beast. Daniel calls him the little horn. And what does John see happening to the Antichrist that Daniel didn't see?
the fall,
The what?
the fall of the Antichrist
Well, what does he see specifically?
was defeated by Jesus.
Specifically, what does he see?
Okay.
How is he defeated?
You see the Almighty God, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
No, don't read it. Just tell me. Because it's one thing to read something, but when you put it in your own words, then I know that the
Okay.
class understands what they just read. Put it in your own words. How is Antichrist defeated?
Okay, you see the fight between Antichrist and Jesus and the army of Jesus, which is upon a white horse.
And who is this army, by the way?
That's the church.
That's right, the church. Not the tribulation saints, but the church. The church comes back from heaven
Yes.
when Jesus comes back in Revelation 19, the second coming. How do we get up in heaven? Because we're here in Ingrid's apartment. How do we get to heaven?
The rapture.
The rapture. So we get raptured and we get up there. We're there for 7 years for the marriage feast of the Lamb. At the end of that 7-year period of time, which on earth is called the what?
The tribulation
The tribulation period.
period.
Okay, so we get on white horses and we come back with Jesus to the earth. When Jesus gets back to the earth, what does he do to the Antichrist and the false prophet?
He kills them, he throws them in the lake of fire.
That's right. That's the key operative phrase I'm looking for. They get killed,
with
resurrected.
brimstone.
I'm saying, say it.
With
Brimstone. Brimstone, right.
Yeah, brimstone.
Which tells us that hell is a place of fire and torment, not just a metaphor. It's a place that has what can best be described as fire and brimstone. Antichrist and false prophet become the first two occupants of the lake of fire. And the armies that were on the Antichrist side, meaning the transgenic, genetically modified humans and the human beings who have taken the what?
Mark of the beast.
The mark of the beast. What does Jesus do with them?
Well, it throws them with the false prophet and
Well, he kills them, is what he does.
Slain with a sword.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that they threw him with the false prophet.
Yeah.
What probably happens after he kills them is that their spirits go into Hades. And we studied about Hades being the holding place for damned human souls. It doesn't say that they go into the lake of fire until 1,000 years later. So what Jesus does at the second coming is he kills those people. And 70 times 7, which is about what we're about to get into in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, also has, I think, a corollary subtextual context or meaning that relates to the age or period or dispensation of grace and forgiveness and repentance of sin leading to eternal life. There's a point in time when you can no longer be saved by repenting. Now we can be saved by repenting, but at the conclusion of what Jesus calls 70 times 7, you can no longer be saved even if you repent. And that's a very frightening period of time, my friend. And the question is, when does that kick in? We're going to look at that in a second. Okay, so second coming of Christ, Antichrist is captured, killed, resurrected, thrown into the lake of fire, along with the false prophet. Jesus kills those who took the mark of the beast and joined up with the Antichrist. And the church returns with Jesus to initiate the millennial reign of Christ on earth for a period of how long?
forever and ever.
Nope.
1,000 years.
Called the millennial reign for a reason. And the Bible gives hints as to what its own interpretation is. So when you hear certain words, you want to think etymologically, meaning the study of the meaning of words. When you say Christ has a millennial reign, that's some fancy religious phrase, but what does it literally mean?
1,000-year.
1,000-year reign.
It's from Latin, millennium. The Latin word for a year is what?
Anna.
Annum. Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. And the Latin word for 1,000 is what? Milli. Like millipede. An insect that has 1,000 legs is called a millipede. The insect that has 100 legs is called a what?
Centipede.
Centipede, because the Latin word for 100 is the centi, is the prefix for that, which is where we get the word century, which means how many years?
100.
Or
Right.
Centurion.
Right, or centurion, which means he's part of a military band of 100 soldiers. So milli-annum means, annum being the plural form of the word year, means how many years, Steve? 100?
1,000.
1,000 years. So the millennial reign of Christ means the reign of Christ on earth for how many years? 1,000, that's right. He's going to reign forever and ever, but he's only going to reign on this present planet Earth for 1,000 years. And at the end of the 1,000 years, what's he going to do?
Let it all burn.
Heaven and earth is going to pass away. Great white throne judgment is going to occur. All of the unsaved dead that are in Hades are going to be called out of Hades, put on trial at the great white throne, and then relocated to heaven. Philip.
No, heaven and hell. The
Explain that and how that
Okay,
works. Now,
So some gonna go to heaven, and the other gonna go to hell.
negative, not accurate. The exact opposite is true. Everybody that appears I tried to emphasize this, and it's my fault because I didn't emphasize it enough when we were doing the hell teaching. Of the individuals that appear for trial at the great white throne judgment, how many are saved, Steve?
0.
How many are acquitted?
None.
How many are condemned to the lake of fire?
Every one of them. 100%.
Everybody that goes before the Lord Jesus Christ at the great white throne judgment, everyone is condemned and sentenced to a particular position in the lake of fire. Nobody is saved. That's the tragedy of appearing at the great white throne judgment. There is no hope for anyone. It's just a question of how severe your conduct. Will you be closer to the bottom of the pyramid where Satan is? Or will you be closer to the top where the mass majority of people that didn't get saved but weren't Charles Manson, who thought they were getting into heaven because they were like good people, but they still wind up in hell because they weren't born again. Everybody that is called forth to appear at the great white throne judgment is condemned to the lake of fire. And so all of the people that got killed by Jesus at his second coming, who took the mark of the beast, they went into Hades for the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Antichrist and the false prophet alone go into the lake of fire. Satan, during that 1,000-year period of time, goes where?
Tartarus. Under bottomless pit.
Bottomless pit, also known as the Abuso, which is connected to Tartarus, which is the holding place for fallen angels, as opposed to fallen humans. At the end of the 1,000 years, then Satan is released from the bottomless pit, and he's allowed to go back on the earth for a short period of time, and then what happens to him?
Turning to the lake of fire. He's released and
Fire. Fire comes down from God when he attacks Jerusalem, the earthly Jerusalem, and he's cast where?
to the lake of fire.
Where the beast and the false prophet are. Then the great white throne judgment occurs when heaven and earth burns up. And at that point, all of the rest of human beings and fallen angels that are in Tartarus waiting their trial, and humans in Hades waiting their trial, they're all brought forward. Angels are tried by human beings who are part of the church. We judge the fallen angels and the demons and assign them their position in the lake of fire. Whereas Jesus judges fallen human beings and assigns them their position in the lake of fire based upon their works. However bad they were, that's how bad their assignment in the lake of fire is. But for even the best sweet in the lake of fire, it's going to be torment, right? Everybody gets tormented there, because some get tormented more than others. So there you have it. And this is a good review, because it's really important that we really have to take upon ourselves, especially if you're a man, the position of being a teacher now. You have got to know the word, because we are in a time that the Bible refers to as the time of deception, when our leaders in our ecclesiastical temples are feeding us lies because they know that shopping the prosperity gospel that Mark was talking about is the best way to get butts in the seats and what in the coffers. Tinkling of cash, cha-ching. You get money by making people happy and entertaining them, not by telling them destruction is coming, judgment is coming, repent and be born again. That's not going to get you a lot of money. So the churches, and I say that in quotes, are giving us a different gospel. And so each one of us has the responsibility to learn the Word of God on our own. And together, we're doing this. Our meeting tonight is the church because we're all believers, we're all born again. And so we're learning the Word of God. And in learning the Word of God, we now have the capacity and the ability to do what? Share it with others. So I don't have to worry about going to Great Glory or some television evangelist who I'm not going to ever meet probably. And even if I did go to the church for 10 years, like I went to Calvary Chapel for 12 years, I never had a conversation with Bob Philip. I don't know if any of you guys ever did. I never did.
I tracked him down in the hallway one day.
Okay. I never tracked him down in the hallway. And if I did, I don't know what I would even say to him. So we've got to be able to know the basics of the gospel. And the basic of Bible prophecy, because that's the most important part of the Bible. Jesus made that a real emphasis. And the reason why that's a real emphasis is that can wake people up out of their slumber and get them on the bandwagon and get them getting other people saved. So with that, we conclude Daniel chapter 8, and we will now begin Daniel chapter 9, which is the prophecy of, as we see on the big board here, the 70 weeks, the prophecy of the 70 weeks. And to start out with the prophecy of the 70 weeks, we need to do what Daniel did. And what Daniel did was to review the book of Daniel. Excuse me, the book of Jeremiah. Now let me throw up my chart on the metallic man dream. Remember the prophecy of the metallic man, Daniel chapter 2. Daniel interpreted the dream of King who?
Nebuchadnezzar,
Who was the king of what country?
Babylon.
Babylon. And he had a dream that he couldn't remember that Daniel interpreted, and it was of a metallic man. And the metallic man's head was made of what?
Gold.
And his chest was made of what?
Silver,
And his hips were of,
bronze,
and his legs were of
Clay.
Iron.
iron.
And clay.
No, iron.
Sorry.
And his feet were made of
Iron and clay.
iron mixed with clay. So this is where your iron and clay are, but the legs are iron. So the Roman, and so we got the interpretation of the metallic man. The head of gold was who?
Nebuchadnezzar.
The Babylonian empire led by Nebuchadnezzar. The chest of silver was who?
Media Persian.
Media Persia, that Persian empire that had Artaxerxes Longimanus, Ahasuerus, and all those Persian emperors were the Persian empire, which was slightly inferior to the head of gold, which was the Babylonian empire. I mean, it was impressive, but not quite as impressive as the Babylonian empire. And then we got the hips of bronze or brass, which was symbolized by what?
Greek
Empire.
Empire.
The Greek Empire, which was led by whom?
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great. He was described as a he-goat or as a leopard because he was so fast in taking over the world. Finally, we get to the legs of iron, which is what empire?
Woman.
Roman Empire, which dissolves but isn't defeated. But because of the statue, it reveals to us that the Roman Empire, which disappeared from the face of the earth, will what? Will come back again. It will revive. But this time, it won't be just made of iron. It will have something else mixed in. Miry clay, which can be also interpreted probably in your Bible has a word there, miry or earthy clay, which some Bible scholars have interpreted to mean
Return of the Nephilim.
the return of the Nephilim. That in the old Roman Empire, they were all human beings. You know, they worshiped Caesar as God and they were dumb, but they were humans. The revived Roman Empire will be human beings combined with entities that are partly human and partly not human. And they will mingle themselves with the DNA, it says, or the seed of man, but they won't cling to one another. In other words, humans aren't going to be able to get along with these extraterrestrial aliens who are really fallen angels who have, through genetic manipulation, found a way to create for themselves biogenetic avatars that derive from stolen human DNA to build machines for themselves to live in so that they can walk and talk and interact in the Antichrist kingdom here on the earth in the final 7-year period of time, which is the 70th week of Daniel. But Jesus will come along. He is the stone cut out without hands, and he will crush the kingdom of the Antichrist, which includes individuals who are human and individuals who are Nephilim fighting together against Jesus. Now, I went through all of that to say that at the beginning of the Babylonian captivity, at the beginning, Daniel was a young teenage boy in Israel when what happens?
When Israel was taken as punishment from the Lord because they didn't respect the period of time of rest from the earth, so God punished them for 70 years to be under slave and taken under the control of Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, so Daniel gets taken as a slave to the land of Babylon. And so we have our little chart here, and our little chart there, we'll see that we have the land of Israel is right here, and we have Media Persia. The Media Persian Empire here used to be the Babylonian Empire. Before Media Persia arose, this was all considered the Babylonian Empire. So Daniel gets taken as a slave from here in Israel, Jerusalem, all the way over here to Babylonia, which is really right about here. And a little bit further west, you have the kingdom of Media, and to the south of that is the kingdom of Persia. Babylon ruled the area with an iron fist. until God decided to end the Babylonian Empire because they desecrated the temple implements during a party that the last Babylonian king Belshazzar threw. And Media combined together with Persia and took over the Babylonian Empire. So Daniel's over here in Babylon, for 70 years, and eventually Israel is allowed to go back from Babylonian captivity back home to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. Okay, so that gives us our geographical assay. So Daniel starts out his Babylonian captivity as a teenager. By the time he's an old man, the Babylonian captivity of how long?
70
70
years.
70 years. Not 70 weeks, but 70 years, literal years.
About 83.
360-day years. By the time that's coming to a close, Daniel's what? He's not,
83 years?
yeah, he's in his 80s, right? And he is reading
Jeremiah.
the prophecies of the book of Jeremiah when he realizes, holy crap, it's almost over. We'll get to go home in like 2 years. We'll be out of here. And he gets excited. What is it that he read that he got so excited about, Steve? Jeremiah chapter 25, read for us verses 6 through 9, first off.
Jeremiah 25, 6 through 9.
Yep.
And go not after other gods to serve them and to worship them, and provoke me not to anger with the works of your hands, and I will do you no hurt. Yet ye have not hearkened unto me, saith the Lord, that ye might provoke me to anger with the works of your hands to your own hurt. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, because you have not heard my words, behold, I will send and take all families of the north, saith the Lord, and Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them again this land. Bring them against this land, and against the inhabitants thereof, and against all these nations round about, and will utterly destroy them, and make them an astonishment, and a hissing, and a perpetual desolation.
Ingrid, you had a question?
I was looking for this 70 years for
Okay.
the light bulb. I guess maybe that's coming.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, of course. Sure, of course it is. I'm not gonna not give you guys what you're looking for. That's my job there. That's not my job.
Switch.
So we find out that Nebuchadnezzar is used, even though he's a pagan king at this point, as the servant of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we see that oftentimes happens, right? God will use even Gentile pagan enemies of God to punish Israel because Israel is in a different relationship with God, right? What kind of relationship would you characterize that as?
Disobedient.
Well, it would be a parental relationship. God is the father, and Israel are the children. And good parents do what to their kids when they get out of line?
Discipline them.
You discipline your kids. If you don't discipline your kids, you are an irresponsible parent. And God is nothing if not a responsible parent. And so he uses the pagan king, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, as his servant to punish his child. Now, what Ingrid was pointing out is, and actually I'll probably rearrange, the reading of the verses next time so that we can, to get to the point that we're looking at. So Mark was going to be the guy that read it next, but Ingrid, go ahead and read for us Leviticus chapter 25, verses 3 through 5. Go ahead, Mark. Mark, you go. And I'll come back to you.
Leviticus.
Chapter 25,
Mm-hmm.
verses 3 through 5.
Sorry. All right. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. But thou shalt neither sow thy field nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather the grapes of thy vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land.
Okay, so we find in the book of Leviticus, which is one of the first books in the Bible, part of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses where God gave the law specifically to you. These are the things that you must do, Israel, and these are the things that you must not do. We get this strange, order regarding the land. The land is to be worked for how many years?
6.
And then it is to be rested for how long?
1 year.
1 year. So out of every 7 years, and God seems to work on this perfect numerical system, 7 being the year of completion of perfection, for every 7 years, the land is to be worked for how long?
6.
And rested for how long?
1.
Okay, and he also mentions elsewhere in Leviticus that for human beings, they are to work their jobs for how many days?
6 days.
And how many days should they rest thereafter?
1 day.
Okay, and the Lord says the reason why he does that, and the example that he gave for us initially, comes from where?
The creation, when he created the world.
Yeah, Genesis chapters 1 and 2. It says that the Lord created the world in how many days?
6.
Wow, last time I got you. This time, very good. I got you last time. This time feels like
I got you.
He was looking for me this time.
I was waiting this one.
I tried to slip it in on you.
I'll bring you whatever.
I thought I had you. But yeah, that's right. He didn't create the world in 7 days. He created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day, he rested. As an example, not because he got tired, but as an example for us, for ourselves to work 6 days and rest a day so that we can rest our bodies and we don't break down. The same is true for the land. We know through agricultural science that there are nutrients that live in the dirt, but that if you go beyond 6 years, you can actually leach the nutrients out of the soil and kill the soil. The soil itself will be nutrient dead and it won't support life. But if you work it for 6 years, agricultural scientists have found, just like the Bible told us, then you give it a year off, it'll come back and be just as fruitful again on the 8th year as it was in the 1st year. And so the Bible, again, proves itself after scientific testing as being truthful and valid. So, okay, we get Leviticus saying you work the land for 6 years and rest it for 1 year. And then we find out from Jeremiah, God used Nebuchadnezzar as his servant to punish Israel for violating the land. And specifically now, let's go to 2 Chronicles, chapter 36, 20 and 21, Mark. 2 Chronicles, which comes after 1st and 2nd Kings,
Chapter.
36, verse 20 and 21. So we've got 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. That'll be after the first 5 books of Moses.
36, what verse?
20 and 21.
And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon. They were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah. And so the land had enjoyed her Sabbath, so as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years.
70 years is how long?
70 years.
7 years.
There you go. We find out right there in 2nd Chronicles, chapter 36, that the God of heaven allowed Israel to be taken captive by Babylon to enforce a rest period for the land of Israel. And the land of Israel had been cheated out of 70 years of rest, which means that if they cheated the land of Israel out of 70 years of rest, how long a period of time did that occur over?
490.
490, right? God gave them almost 500 years to get it right, and they continued to violate it. And after 490 years of violating the land, he says, you owe me 70. So I'm taking you out and giving the land 70 years Sabbath, so the land can restore itself. Okay, and so now let's jump back into Jeremiah, Steve. This time Jeremiah chapter 29. Read for us verse 1, and then skip down and read verses 10 through 14. Jeremiah 29. And this is what Daniel is reading that reminds him of what's going on, that gets him excited. Jeremiah 29, chapter 1, and 10 through 14.
Now, these are the words of the letter that Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem unto the residue of the elders which were carried away captives, and to the priests and to the prophets, and to all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had carried away captive from Jerusalem to Babylon. Verse 10. For thus saith the Lord, that after 70 years be accomplished in Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you in causing you to return to this place. For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me, and ye shall search for me with all your heart. And I will be found of you, saith the Lord. And I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith the Lord. And I will bring you again to the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive.
Okay, and the place that he caused him to be carried away captive was what?
Babylon?
Babylon. That's right. That's right. And he says, right there, he says, after 70 years, what's going to happen? He's going to let them come back home. He's going to return again in their captivity. Daniel is sitting there now in his mid to late 80s, and he's reading Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 10, and he's like realizing, wait a minute. Jeremiah said that God told him that after 70 years we get to go home. It's been, I'm getting ready to go home now. I was 12 when I got taken into captivity. I'm 83 now. That means in 2 years, it'll be all over. We get to go home. So he's now praising the Lord and praying and repenting on behalf of the nation Israel, so that, that the Lord will realize that, he's in agreement with the word of the Lord. He's not praying so that they can go home. He's praying because he knows they're going to go home. He's thanking the Lord for it. So let's jump, if you would, Ingrid, to Daniel chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. And let's pick it up at the beginning of Daniel chapter 9. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar has passed on. He's become a born-again believer, if you will, or redeemed and later born again when Jesus visited him down in Hades. And he's now gone. And the Babylonian Empire has been replaced by the Medo-Persian Empire. And now Darius or Darius, the king of Persia, is ruling over the land that once was the Babylonian Empire. So Daniel is now an older man in verses 1 and 2 of Daniel chapter 9.
In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem.
Okay, so what we find out is that, one, again, you look at our little chart here, we find out it's the first year of Darius, or Darius, who was the great king of Persia, who actually was not of Persian descent, but he was from the Medes. Remember, we learned that Media and Persia united together through marriage to make the kingdom stronger, which back in the day, in ancient times, was done frequently, right? Oftentimes, you would take one kingdom, which was smaller. Let me just get that up there so that people at home can see that. See it? The Medes and the Persians. Let's see, right there, you get the whole panoply of Media, Persia, and Babylon. Let's see, Syria, Babylonia, right there, next to Media. All right, how's that for special camera effects? All right, so what we find out is that, from the Medes comes this King Darius, who is now the ruler of the united Medo-Persian Empire. And it's in the first year of his reign that Daniel is reading specifically the book of Jeremiah, and he realizes from verse 10 that 70 years is the time period of penalty, and that's almost up. So it's exciting time now. It's time to go home almost. So,
So let me,
what-
just to clarify, so I'm understanding that they were held in captivity for 70 years.
Yes.
Because they essentially cheated the land out of rest. So are we even saying coincidentally, or not coincidentally, it also has the same symbolism of the 70 weeks of Daniel, which we really haven't delved into yet. We
Right.
just said they were in captivity for 70 years.
Right. I would say there are no coincidences, you know, in the Bible. It coincides with 7 years, but it's not coincidental in the colloquial sense. It's done on purpose
Correct.
as a teaching tool for the Lord.
Okay.
It seems like the Bible and prophecies in the Bible are geared by the Lord with mathematical precision,
Mhm.
so that if we sit down and study the Word, we can know what God's plans are going to be.
Mhm.
So we find out that the land was owed 70 years rest.
Right.
But then, almost like a wordplay, he takes 70 years as from being simply 70 years or 360-day years, and in the Hebrew it's 70 shabuim, which is weeks of years. So if I say a week, I'm going to be on vacation for a week, you presume that I mean I'm going to be gone for how long?
7 days.
7 days, because that's what we think of in terms of the term week. But in Israel, a shabuim is just a unit of 7, and since they were an agrarian country, it wasn't unusual for them to think of shabuim as a unit of 7. It could be 7 days, but oftentimes it was also 7 years. So if you rested the land for one shabuim, that would mean you had rested for 7 years. But because the shabuim is a unit of 7, and so it wasn't unusual for them to say, give the land its week's rest. They would know that that means 7 years rest. Now, you only rested one of the 7 years, but they understood that week to make reference to a week of years, not a week of days,
Right.
like we do, even though they had their understanding of one Sabbath day's rest and 6 days work before the next Sabbath day's rest. So it wasn't unusual to speak of units of 7 years.
Mhm.
That was common parlance for ancient Israel, because they were an agrarian, crop-growing country, and they thought of the land in terms of the years. The land isn't like a man that needs to get, a day off every 6 days. It's, a bigger, stronger entity, and it got a year off for every 6 years' work. So a unit, or shabuim, would be a total of 7 years. So there's a double entendre there when it talks about the 70 weeks. 70
Mhm.
weeks of what? 70 weeks of days, or 70
Years.
weeks of years? So you got 70 years that the land was owed, that was owed to God for the Sabbath's rest. But then you also had a total of 70 shabuim, or 70 units of 7 years, which is the total time frame it took to pay back 70 years rest for the land. If you could only pay back 1 year for every 7 years, it would take 490 years, or 70 shabuim, which is 70
Weeks of years.
weeks of, not days, of years, which gives you a total number of 490 years. And that's what I would refer to as 490 prophetic years, because we find out that this 490 years has special significance. At the end of the 490 years, we're going to find out something very incredible happens. But we also find out that 490 years are not, starts with a C,
Contiguous.
contiguous, meaning one right after another, all attached to each other. But there is starts with a G, clothing store, gap between, right? No, it's the way it's teaching to it, right? And we'll remember it better that way. There is a gap in that 70 years, and we're going to talk about where that gap falls, and what, more importantly, fills that gap.
Church age.
Oh, there you go. See, she let the cat out of the bag early. So go ahead, if you would, Ingrid, and read for us Daniel chapter 20, 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. 20.
Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 through 23.
Oh, 20 to 20.
I'm sorry.
All right. 22, 23. Sorry. And whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sins of my people of Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of evening ovulation.
No, ovulation.
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 What did I
okay.
say?
I thought you said ovulation.
No.
No.
Ovulations.
Let's hold off on
Oblation,
the,
no.
You know, on the, what do you
No.
call it when you attribute human attributes
Oh,
to something not
oh.
human?
Personification.
Well, not personality, there's another word that's even better.
I know exactly. I know the one.
Anthropomorphication.
There you go.
You know, all right. So no, go ahead and read it again now. Ingrid.
When Gabriel, oblation.
Oblation, which means if there was a wine sacrifice, you would pour out like an oblation to the Lord at the temple, which, by the way, doesn't exist anymore because it got destroyed. So it shows you that Daniel was still remembering, even now, you know, many decades after he was taken away from Israel, and many decades after the temple was destroyed during the Babylonian captivity, at the beginning of the Babylonian captivity, back in, you know, in, goodness forbid, I forget what year it happened, but it was a long time. It was some 60 some odd years earlier. 60 some odd years earlier, the temple had been destroyed, but it was about the time when you would do the evening oblation at the temple that he's praying for a return to the land and a rebuilding of the temple, when he's interrupted by none other than Gabriel, archangel of the Lord, who appears in human form, and he has a message for Daniel. So go ahead, Hebrews, if you would.
Okay.
20 through 23.
23. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to shew thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision.
Okay, and the vision is going to be given to us in the next verse, which Daniel is being, you know, given the privilege of learning in advance. Why? Because he's greatly beloved by the Lord. You know, the Lord thinks so highly of Daniel. He's like, guess what? God's going to reveal his plan for the human race. All the kingdoms of the world were revealed to you and King Nebuchadnezzar in the dreams of the metallic man and the dreams of those four strange beasts. But we've got something else that we want to reveal to you. God said for me to tell you the following. And so why don't you give us, verse 24 is a mouthful there. Phil, read verse 24. This is the first thing that Gabriel reveals from the throne of God to Daniel.
70 weeks.
There's that magical number, 70. But 70, not days, but 70 Shabuim in Hebrew, or 70 weeks of years. Go ahead.
70 weeks are determined upon the people and upon the holy city to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophesy, and to anoint the most holy.
Okay, so 70 weeks of years, or a total of how many years?
490 years.
Right. Daniel would have understood when the angel tells him 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. He knows that the angel is saying 490 years are determined upon thy people. And during this 490 years, or at the conclusion of this 490 years, all of these magical things are going to happen. Transgression is going to be finished or ended. Sins will be ended. Reconciliation for iniquity will have been accomplished. And everlasting righteousness will be brought in at the end of the 490 years. And Daniel, oh, this is awesome, man. At the end of 490 years from a period of time that Gabriel is going to tell him the starting point of, at the end of that 490 years, the kingdom of God on earth will begin. That's amazing. So Daniel's sitting there saying like, man, I mean, I'm in my flesh, I'm not going to live to see it, but my great grandkids will. You know, it's only you know,
Few
4 or
generations.
5 generations down the road, the kingdom of heaven will begin. 490 years later, there will be everlasting righteousness, meaning righteousness that can never end, on the planet Earth. The kingdom of heaven being established on earth in just 490 years, or 70 weeks of years. So he's excited about that. Now we find out, you know, and I guess we can go ahead and read verse 25. Let's go ahead and have Mark, why don't you go ahead and give us verse 25, which is also, it's one verse, and I broke them up into one verse segments because there's a mouthful of information there. But let's do this. Read 25 and 26 for us.
Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks.
Of years, boys and girls. He knows that he's talking about, you know, the Shavuot, you know, the weeks of years. So it'll be 7 weeks and 66 weeks. Read that again, Mark.
And 62 weeks.
Okay, and how many total weeks of years would that be?
69.
69. So if you have 2 plus 67, that gives you 69. So he's saying after 69 weeks of years, this is going to happen from the point in time where it starts is the going forth of the command to do what? To
Rebuild,
Restore and rebuild.
Nehemiah was sent to restore and rebuild the temple.
the temple. From that point, when that's given, there'll be 69 weeks of years, which is how many 360-day years? How many years is that?
483?
483 years. Because if you multiply 7 times 70, which is your weeks of years, you will get a total of how much?
400.
And if you're slow in math like me, you take the easy route out and you multiply 7 times 70 and then subtract 7. And if you subtract 7 from 490, even I can figure out that's 483. As opposed to multiplying 69 times 7 in your head. Try to do that and see how much more difficult that is. Right, Steve's like, oh, we do accounting work. So for Ingrid and Steve, that's easy. But for me and Phil, that's going to be more daunting to multiply 69 times 7 in your head as opposed to multiplying 7 times 70 and subtracting 7. That's the easy way. I learned that from Dave Hunt, who was himself a certified public accountant, or he was when he was here on the earth. Okay, so go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
So after that period of time, the street shall be built again in the wall, even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, and not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and to the end of the war desolations are determined.
Okay, so we have a date, as Dave Hunt said when he gives a teaching on this. He said we got a date. And that date is what? We have in verse 24, 25, and 26, we have a date. It says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem, which we find out is given in another prophetic book, we find that out in Nehemiah, that it was Artaxerxes Longimanus, and that it was in the 20th year of Artaxerxes Longimanus. There were a couple of kings of Persia named Artaxerxes, but only one of them ruled as long as 20 years. And we find out that it was in the 20th year of Artaxerxes Longimanus. So now we know what year it is, because we know his reign started in 465 BC. So if it was the 20th year of his reign that started in 465, we know it must have been in 445 BC that this commandment to restore and build was given. But we also know that it was in the first month of that year, which on the Israeli calendar or the Jewish calendar was the month called Nisan. And we have archaeological proof, and you know, you can find all this again, man. I keep forgetting to bring the book, The Coming Prince by Sir Robert Anderson. I have a rare copy of that. But if you look at the book, The Coming Prince by Sir Robert Anderson, who was the chief of Scotland Yard in the late 1800s and a mathematician and a born-again Christian, he was able to go to the London Royal Observatory and get all the dates and the numbers crunched from the day that we know from archaeological records that the commandment to restore and rebuild was given. We found out that it was the 10th day of the first month of the Jewish calendar, which is Nisan, in the year 445 BC. So we have a date that the 69 weeks of years begins running from. And that date is what, Steve?
445? Yeah, 445.
Okay.
Nissan 10.
Nisan 10, 445 BC. So, it's great. We've got 69 weeks of years, and so we'll look at our 70 weeks chart here. And again, we see that 69 times 7, and Sir Robert Anderson did all the math for us, so thankfully, 360-day years. They had a 360-day year in ancient Israel, not a 365-day year, which was the Julian calendar that the Romans sort of, changed us to back in what, like 60 AD or 70 AD, or whether we went to the 365-day year. But the lunar calendar, which was more accurate, gives us 360 days in a year, just like you have how many degrees in a circle?
360.
Not 365. There's no circle with 365 degrees. It's 360 degrees in a circle. So the accurate, determination of days of years would be 360. So you take 69 times 7 times 360, and then you account for your leap years, which are 116 during that 69 or 483-year period of time. There will be 116 leap years. And from March 14th to April 6th, you have to add 24 days because there is no year one, BC. Like if you go from 1 BC to 180, that's not 1 BC, 0, and 180. There's just 2 years between 1 BC and 180, not 3 years as you would think. Like 1, 0, then 1 plus, -1, 0, 1 plus. That gives you 3, but you really have just 1. So you have a total of 116 leap years, and then 24 years because of the time frame. 116 days because of leap years, and then another 24 days from March 14th to April 6th. Gives you from our total of 476 times 365, which is our conversion from our 365-day calendar into the 360-day calendar. If you add all that up, it gives you 173,880 days to the day from the decree, which under a Julian calendar would have been March 14th, 445 BC to April 6th, 32 AD. But if you were using a Jewish calendar, it would be from Nisan 10, which is the equivalent of March 14th, 445 BC, to Nisan 10, 32 AD. And again, you get 173,880 days. So you have the 69 weeks and 69 weeks divided out into 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So you have 7 weeks of years plus 62 weeks of years, gives you a total of 69 weeks of years until this really important event occurs. Messiah the King is supposed to come at this triumphal entry, but he's supposed to come and he's going to be, according to Mark, what Mark read said he's going to be cut off. What does that mean?
Killed, karat.
Karat is the Hebrew word in the book of Daniel, which means to be cut off. So we have the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem given by King Artaxerxes Longimanus, Nisan 10, 445 BC, 173,800 days to the day, and that gives us our big 70 weeks of Daniel timeline. So now we just went from here to here, the first 69 weeks of years. First 69 weeks of years, which is 483 years, we know started out Nisan 10, 445 BC right here, the decree of Artaxerxes for the Jews to rebuild and restore the walls of Jerusalem, which we find in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. And Ingrid, since you found that, why don't you just flip over there real quick and throw that in there for us.
That's at the end.
Nehemiah. Since you already seem to know that by heart. So Nehemiah chapter 2, verses
Sorry.
5 through 8.
I can't find. I just remember reading it. have it?
No. Whoever finds it.
Yeah, whoever. Not too early. When can I get it?
And so, from that point, Artaxerxes gives the commandment to restore and to rebuild. We know that from that point forward, Nisan 10, 445 BC, which we find recorded in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 5 through 8, that you now have a starting point where you count forward how many days, Steve?
One of that was at 173,880.
880. That's right. So from Nisan 10 of 445 BC,
All right. Nehemiah 2. It was lurking tonight. Nehemiah 2, what is it?
5 through 8.
Okay. 5 through 8. And I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sculptures, that I may build it. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him, for how long shall thy journey be? And when wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. Moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given to me to the governors beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come into Judah. And a letter unto Aspha, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace which appertain to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me, according to the good hand of my God upon me.
So Nehemiah found favor with King Artaxerxes Longimanus, and he was given permission because he was looking sad one day, and the king was like, "You've done so much for the Persian Empire. Why are you looking sad?" He was like a contemporary prophet to Daniel. And he's like, "Oh, the temple sits in ruins, and it's shattered and torn down, whatever." And he was like, "What'll make you happy?" He said, "If I get permission to go back and have it rebuilt, then, if you wrote a letter saying that was okay, then I'd be happy again." The king's like, "Granted, go and do what you want to do," and you got this, the support of the king. So God put it in the heart of Artaxerxes Longimanus, the king of Persia, which succeeded the Babylonian Empire, to allow the temple to be rebuilt. Parenthetically and coincidentally, in quotes, because there are no coincidences in the Bible, this happened to be exactly how many years after the captivity of Nebuchadnezzar began? So 70 years later, there's a new king on the throne. A new empire is holding Israel captive. The Persian Empire has now just replaced the Babylonian Empire, and the Persian king is favorable to both Daniel and Nehemiah and gives permission. Daniel's pretty much in retirement at this point, but Nehemiah is still running around doing stuff, and he goes before the king and says, "Hey, my people, have been here and good servants to the Persian Empire, and I want this for them." And he gives them permission to go back and do it. So it's a supernatural occurrence. But importantly, this particular date, if you go 69 weeks of years from the decree of Artaxerxes Longimanus to Nisan 10 of 445 BC, we find out that is a very significant day in Bible prophecy. What day is that?
Nisan 32 AD?
32 AD, I'm sorry. Nisan 10, 32 AD. From Nisan 10, 445 BC, 483 years later, it's Nisan 10 of 32 AD. What significant date is that?
Palm Sunday.
It's Palm Sunday. In other words, that's the day that what happens?
When you pick your lamb,
Christ enters
One at a
Jerusalem.
time. Okay. Jesus Christ enters Jerusalem for the last time. And he comes in riding in a Lamborghini, is that right?
No.
What's he riding in when he
On a
goes into
donkey.
Jerusalem? On a donkey. Not even just a donkey, but a baby donkey.
Mhm.
Why does he ride in on a baby donkey?
It was
Why do you
prophesied.
think he arranged for that?
It was prophesied in Zechariah, but why do you think he arranged for it?
That's right. That's right. Now, throughout Jesus' 3-year earthly ministry, he would do these miracles, and he would always tell the people that he did the miracles for, "Shh, don't tell anybody." Why?
The time is not come
The
yet.
time has not yet come. "Woman, what do I have to do with thee?" he said to his mother Mary. "My time has not yet come." He said that at the beginning of his earthly ministry when his mom said, "Yo, throw a miracle and turn all this water into wine because we ran out of wine for the bachelorette party or whatever." He was like, "Woman, what have I to do with thee? My time has not yet come." But now, instead of avoiding being thrust into the position of the King of Israel and the Messiah, fulfilling the prophecies of Zechariah, he arranges for it. And he arranges for it because it is a special day. And what day is that?
Palm Sunday.
It's the Palm Sunday. And the reason why it's Palm Sunday is because what day on the calendar is it?
Nisan 10.
Of 32 AD, which is exactly how long after the Artaxerxes Longimanus came?
69 weeks.
Not 69 weeks.
483 years.
483 years, which is 69 weeks of years. 483 years later,
What I said, 69 weeks.
you said 69 weeks.
Weeks of years.
You didn't say weeks of years. You
No,
said
I didn't say, but we were speaking from
It's important
Say it.
for
If you-
everybody else.
Right.
This is key.
What you think in your mind
Yeah.
and what you say on the exam, if I'm grading you on the exam, you're not getting full credit for that because you didn't complete the answer. I want to show your work, as they used to say in the math class.
Learning it. It's
So,
a weird thing.
All right, if you say 69 weeks, we have an understanding of 69 weeks. 69 weeks would be 7 times 7 days, which would be 49 days, right?
Mhm.
So,
But not in this
or,
case.
for right. So clearly, we're talking about 483 years, and so 483 years later to the day, Jesus rides in. It becomes Palm Sunday in the Christian faith because it was the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey for the final time, in fulfillment of centuries-old prophecies about how the Messiah would ride into Jerusalem, and is, proclaimed in the book of Psalms as the King of Israel. Blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord. The guys, the public, who were there at the temple because a big holiday had come up. And what holiday was that was approaching?
the special-
Passover.
Passover, which was like our Christmas and New Year's Eve and 4th of July all rolled into one for the nation Israel. Passover was approaching. People who lived all over the world were coming back to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover at the temple and do sacrifices for the year. And so there's a lot of people in Jerusalem. Jesus arranged for this strange entry into Jerusalem, which sort of corroborates his messianic claims that he's always been downplaying. And when the public sees him, they start singing a song, like an Old Testament biblical hymn that is found in, I think, chapter 118 of the Psalms. It's a psalm which is sort of a prophetic song that's sung about the Messiah. Blessed be he who comes in the name of the Lord. We even have, right, we have the modern day corollary for that. Blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord. And the people started singing that when they saw Jesus riding into Jerusalem on a baby donkey, of all things. How strange, for him, he could have just walked into town. But he did it because he was attempting, or in fact, what he was doing was alerting Israel, hey, today's the day, and you're expected to know today is the day. If you've been doing your homework, you would know today is the day. So, okay, let's go ahead, and I think we're up to you, Steve. Read for us Luke chapter 19, verses 35 to 44, which will give us what actually happened on Nisan 10, 32 AD, some 483 years to the day after Artaxerxes Longimanus gives permission to Nehemiah to restore and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Luke chapter 19, 35 through 44.
And they brought him to Jesus. And they cast their garments upon the colt, and they set Jesus thereon. And as he went, they spread their clothes in the way. And when he was come nigh, even now at the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen, saying, Blessed be the King who cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven, and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. He answered and said unto them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, encompass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation.
Now, Jesus starts crying. When he comes in, he starts weeping, and he says, If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day. What day? It's the 173,880th day after the decree was given in the book of Daniel and Nehemiah that God, the Father, expected them to know. And since they were asleep at the switch, Jesus says, man, if only you knew the things that belong to your peace. But now, you've missed the date, and so now they're hidden from your eyes. And he says, and as a result of that, the day shall come upon thee, and this day eventually did come upon them, where thine enemy shall cast a trench about thee, compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. And he's saying this at the entrance to the temple. When was this prophecy literally fulfilled?
And Titus burned the temple down.
Titus Vespasian, who was a future emperor of Rome, was at the time a general. And what year did this happen? 70 AD. So that was what? Some 38 years after, Jesus made this prophecy, and he's crying about it. Titus Vespasian comes in, not knowing he's fulfilling Bible prophecy, and some say that they tossed a torch into the temple by accident, and it caught stuff on fire. And just like right on time, and interestingly enough, it was 70 AD as opposed to some other AD. And there's that magical number 70 again.
Wow.
I wonder what that means. 70 AD, a torch is accidentally tossed through the window. And so instead of them, the Romans being able to take all the temple implements back to Rome and march through the Arch of Titus, remember when they would conquer a city, they would ride in through the Arch of Titus with all the booty from the war, just like Nebuchadnezzar did in Babylon. Well, they didn't get a chance to do it this time because it all burned to the ground. Because even though the temple was made with those cedar trees from Lebanon, and the walls were coated with sheets of pure gold. And so when the temple burned, gold is the most malleable and precious and fragile of all metals. When the cedar tree started to burn, the gold melted. Now, the temple is built on a foundation of gigantic stones that are cut square and laid down on the Temple Mount. So that when the gold started to melt, the timber, the wood, burned away. But the sheets of gold, what happened to those?
They melted and went between the rocks.
They melted just like a candle. Wax will melt on a candle and it runs down, or gravity pulls it down, to the lowest level, and it went down between the rocks, liquefied. And there, as it cooled, it hardened. So, the Romans, knowing that they didn't have anything to take back the Romans' booty, they decided to deconstruct the temple, stone by stone, to find millions of dollars in gold that had liquefied and ran between the cracks of the temple, so that this prophecy of Jesus is fulfilled literally. Literally, they took the temple apart stone by stone. Why? Their motivation was greed. They wanted to get gold. There's gold in them Dar hills, or temple stones. And so they did it, but they didn't know that God was manipulating circumstances so they would be forced to fulfill literally the prophecies of Jesus on Palm Sunday, that very first Palm Sunday. And the reason why they call it Palm Sunday is because people along the side of the road took palm fronds and waved it up and down as Jesus rode in on a donkey, as they knew would be done of the Messiah. So, Ingrid, if you would, since you mentioned Zechariah, I'm going to let you read the two Old Testament prophecies, and this is the one I don't think we talked about last week. First, go to Exodus chapter 12, or let's do this. You go to Zechariah 9:9. Steve, why don't you do Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 8 and verse 11, while Ingrid is going to find Zechariah 9:9. Zechariah is
Right at the end.
right at the end of the Old Testament. Exodus is obviously right at the beginning. Genesis, Exodus.
Is it 1 through 8?
1 through 8 and verse 11 of chapter 12. Nisan 10, very important day. Nisan 10 is when Artaxerxes Longimanus gave the decree to restore and rebuild the temple. Now, why is Nisan 10 a special day? What's the significance of Nisan 10? Why did God cause Artaxerxes to give permission on that date? And why did Jesus ride in to Jerusalem on that date, Nisan 10? Steve's going to tell. Bill?
It was the day that the sacrifice, must be presented to the temple to make sure that it's clean without any sins to be sacrificed and cut off 3 days. Is that 14?
Nisan 14 is that sacrifice. That's exactly right. And Steve's going to back that up with scripture. Ingrid, did you want to add?
No.
Steve, go ahead and read that for us. That's very good. And where Phil finds that from is Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 8 and 11. We didn't even have it last week, so good recitation of that. That's important. Now we understand how all this fits together, and now you guys can explain this to whoever comes across your path. This is awesome. Read that for us, Steve.
Okay. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months.
Beginning of months. So talking about what we would call, or the Jews would call Nisan, month Nisan, the beginning of months.
It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their father, a lamb for a house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year.
Symbolic of whom? Jesus of Nazareth, a male without blemish, without sin. Go ahead, Steve.
You shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts on the upper door of the post of the house wherein they shall eat. And they shall eat the flesh in the night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Verse 11. And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover.
There you have it. Passover is implemented in Exodus chapter 12. But the Passover, from the very beginning, God gave it to Moses in the Egyptian captivity. At the end of the Egyptian captivity, he gave it to him as a type or foreshadowing of Messiah being presented as the Passover lamb. This lamb was presented to the families on Nisan 10, and it was kept in the house as a pet for 4 days. So the kids would play with it like having a new puppy, giving your kids a puppy at Christmas time on, December 25th. And then on December 29th, you take the puppy in the presence of the kids and you slit its throat and put blood in a bowl, and then you put it on the door of the house. Kids are like, oh, the puppy, what are you doing? It's terrible. And so God instituted this weird ceremony where you take a lamb, a baby lamb, that's perfect and spotless, and a male, by the way, and you let the kids play with it and get to love it and care for it as part of the family for 4 days. And then you brutally kill it on the 14th day of the month. Why? So that when the destroyer comes through the land later that night, you've taken the blood of that lamb that the kids fell in love with, and you dipped it, and with a hyssop branch, you make the sign of the cross over your door. And if you do that, the destroyer comes to the land and doesn't kill anybody in your house. But if you don't do it, if you don't kill that lamb and put that lamb's blood on the door, you get killed. That's what the Passover was. And it was symbolic of the Messiah would come, and we find out that Messiah is Jesus, who would be beloved and who would be innocent, but would have to be killed for the sins of the people. On the cross, where he bled on the cross, his blood can now be applied to our souls, so that when the destroyer comes, we don't have to go into the lake of fire forever. That destruction will pass over us because of the blood of the Lamb, Jesus, in the form of the cross, because of the sacrifice of Calvary, applied to our hearts. We get out of punishment that we deserve, and he gets to get it. That's a great deal. He takes the wrath of God instead of me. But because he's God, he can recover from it and go on to reign and rule. I can't, because I'm the son of Adam and I'm immortal. So if I get the wrath of God, I'm going to spend eternity paying back that debt. Where?
Lake of Fire.
Lake of Fire. Not Lake Havasu in Nevada. It's going to be the Lake of Fire outside there. So we get that Passover from Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 8 and 11. Ingrid, give us Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, which you made allusion to.
Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly, and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass.
Okay, a colt, meaning a baby donkey. A baby donkey is what the Messiah, Zechariah writes this 500 years before Jesus is even born, that the Messiah, when he comes, is going to come into Jerusalem riding on a baby donkey. What an odd thing for the king of Israel to come riding. He should be on like a white stallion, right? Just like all the conquering kings of every nation ever rode in, they always had a white stallion. Maybe he was in a chariot even. But not on a baby donkey. What? But that's what Zechariah wrote down, because God told him to 500 years earlier. So Jesus arranges for himself to ride into Jerusalem on a baby donkey, so it would be a very distinctive thing. It's like saying Messiah's going to roll into Jerusalem in a hot pink Lamborghini with glowing doors. And then 500 years later, when somebody rides into Jerusalem for the first time on Nissan 10, which is a special day of the year, in gold-winged, hot pink Mercedes or Lamborghini, let's say it was the 4th of July, that it was predicted 500 years later that the ruler of the country would come on the 4th of July. If you see some guy rolling into town in a hot pink Lamborghini, you would say, oh, wait a minute. Now, they said 500 years ago that the ruler of the country would come in a hot pink Lamborghini on the 4th of July, and here it is, the 4th of July. You would remember that prophecy or that prediction, and Israel was supposed to remember it, and they didn't.
But he came in lowly, so he came in a Chevy.
Don't quit your day job. That's all I gotta say. Comedy Central will not be contacting you anytime soon. But double entendre, you're right. Yeah, he came meek and lowly, he came in. And that's why, actually, he came in on a donkey. Why? Because he was supposed to be meek and lowly. He wasn't going to be exalted because he came how many times the prophecy of the Old Testament say the Messiah was going to come.
How many?
How many times was he going to come?
I don't understand the question.
How many times does the
2
Old
times.
Testament there you go, Mark. You redeemed yourself. He was supposed to he was prophesied to come twice. That's why the Pharisees and the Sadducees didn't get it. They're like, you can't be the Messiah. You're from the low-rent district of town, Galilee. Can anything good come from out of Nazareth? No, the Messiah is supposed to be a son of David. He couldn't have been the Messiah. If you ask a rabbi today, they'll say he couldn't have been the Messiah. Why? Because he got himself killed. And we know that the Messiah, son of David, sits on the throne of his father David for how long? Forever. And there is no end to his kingdom. So Jesus, because he got killed, couldn't have been the Messiah. That's what a rabbi will tell you today. It was because they did not understand that in those Old Testament prophecies, Messiah was predicted to come not once, but twice. And we see, we should see him, but not
I
now.
understand the question.
Now, there you go. He came the first time to be the Passover lamb.
Yes.
Ah, there you go. The second time he's coming to be what?
To take us.
Right. To take the throne of his father David and be the conquering king. First time he comes lowly and meek, as Mark has just mentioned. That's why he comes on a baby donkey. The second time, though, we find out he comes, he's not riding on a baby donkey anymore. Now he's riding on
that stallion.
the white stallion that can fly through the air. There
Okay,
you go.
alright.
So he had to come twice. And that's what Israel missed. And that's why only those whose heart were really towards the Lord could that truth be revealed. So now, Phil, we're back to you again. So now let's finish up this Daniel prophetic message and give us Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. We've already talked about from verses 24, 25, and 26. We've gotten the 69 weeks of years, which is a period of time of 400 and what?
83 years.
And those years are special prophetic years. They happen to be contiguous. But there is yet a final week of years, which is another or final week of prophetic years. At the conclusion of this final week of years, what's supposed to happen, Phil?
The last week of years is the period that the prince of the darkness will rule the world.
Okay, at the conclusion of that 7 years, what then happens?
The return of Jesus.
Kingdom of heaven is established on earth.
Daniel is told by
Gabriel.
not that Jesus, because Jesus isn't mentioned. That name doesn't pop up until Matthew chapter 1. But what Daniel has just been told, 5 verses earlier, is that at the conclusion of the 70 weeks of years, these things are going to happen. Everlasting righteousness will come in. Sacrifice, sin will be made an end of. And the kingdom of heaven will be on the earth at the end of the 70th week. The 70th week is referenced to Daniel. He says, this is what's going to happen. Know therefore and understand, Gabriel is telling Daniel. The first 69 weeks of years will be verse 24, 5, and 6. And then he says, in verse 27, there's going to be another 7-year period of time, the 70th week of years, which will be different and separated from the first 69 weeks of years, at the conclusion of which the kingdom of heaven will be established on the earth. Read for us Daniel chapter 27. Bill?
And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause
Midst of the week. In the middle.
midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determinate shall be poured upon the desolate.
Okay, so we found out in verse 26, what? And after 62 weeks, which is what? How many weeks of years is that?
62, 69.
69, not 62.
69.
Right?
Yep.
And it says, and after 62 weeks. Now, again, let's go back to our math chart, because that's what confused me. It sounds like it's saying after 62 weeks, Messiah's going to be cut off. And I said, the math doesn't work. That's not 483 years. No, what he's saying is that it's a mathematical equation. He's saying, after 7 weeks and 62 weeks, shall Messiah be cut off. So what he's saying, after 7 weeks of years and 62 weeks of years, which is 483 years, Messiah will be cut off. The second time around, he mentions the mathematical equation, the algebraic formula, but he just mentions the final. He says after the 62 weeks, which is preceded by 7 weeks in this mathematical equation of 69 weeks, Messiah will be cut off. So he's saying after 69 weeks of years. He's just doing the shorthand form of making reference to the mathematical algebraic equation, which is 7 plus 62. And, some Bible prophecy scholars have said that the reason why they divided 7 into 62 is because it took a certain amount of time to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and then it took another period of time to build the temple within the walls or whatever. And that's why this prophecy is divided out into 7 weeks and 62 weeks, as opposed to just saying 69 weeks, which would be a lot easier. So there's always some prophetic significance to it, but we know it's after the 69 weeks of years. It says that Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. In other words, we find out in Matthew chapter 26, and after the 69 weeks of years, Messiah shall be cut off, killed, Ingrid told us. Karat is the word. But, importantly, not for himself. Who does the Messiah get cut off for?
Sacrifice for us.
And we learned that that's the way it has to be because of the rules relating to the what?
The Passover.
The Passover, which we find recorded where in the Bible?
In
Exit.
In Exodus. Exodus chapter 12.
Exodus, yeah.
Right? We find out in Exodus chapter 12, the second book of the Bible, that there's got to be a Passover lamb. In order for the people to be saved, the innocent Passover lamb has to be killed. And his blood has to be put on there. If you just kill him, you don't put the blood on the entrance to your home, which is symbolic of the entrance to our lives, in the form of the cross, you get to take the punishment.
Well,
and
the
get
firstborn. In Exodus, the firstborn.
Well, I know that.
Oh, you're saying-
making the point. You know, I'm saying that we are in that position. Yes, I understand that it was just the firstborn, but if you had a firstborn in your house, would you be happy you woke up by a kid dead in the bed? No, you'd be pretty devastated by that. So, the application of the Passover is that unless each one of us puts the blood over our own house, not that I don't have a firstborn, so you know, I don't have to worry about my firstborn dying. I have to worry about me dying and going into the lake of fire. So that's where we get the rule relating to the Passover. Passover is to preserve us from the judgment of God. It says Messiah is cut off, verse 26, Daniel chapter 9, not for himself. And then it says, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, which happened what year?
70 AD.
70 AD. And who did it?
The
Romans.
Romans. So Titus Vespasian, Roman general, became emperor. So a lot of people believe that the Antichrist will come from out of the Roman Empire. Now that makes it kind of complicated because in other verses in the Old Testament, it refers to the Antichrist as the,
little horn. What?
not just a little horn. That wouldn't cause a problem for him being a Roman. It calls him the Assyrian. And the Assyrian shall come into our land. Now, if we go again to our Bible prophecy map, we'll find out that Assyria actually is, let's see if we can find it here. Babylonia, Assyria, just north of Babylonia. And so that doesn't necessarily create a problem. Let's go ahead and put that right up there on the camera. Let's see.
Which is basically Syria.
Yep, it's modern day Syria and a little more. So we've got Syria and Babylonia. And we find out that the Romans controlled at some point all of that territory, right? So here's a more modern day look at the same area. Now it's called Iraq, it's called Iran, it's called Turkey, and as Mark says, it's called Syria, which is just north of Iraq. So what used to be the Assyrian Empire is now modern day Syria and Iraq. And at some point in time, the Roman Empire controlled all of those lands. So this verse could still mean that the Antichrist comes from the people that destroyed the temple, which is the Roman Empire, or the revived Roman Empire, which would incorporate the old lands of the Roman Empire, not just Rome, the city in Italy, but all of the other territories under Roman control. So the Antichrist could be an Assyrian and still be part of the Roman Empire at the same time. So that's not necessarily a contradiction or a conflict. So we find that verse 26 tells us that the Antichrist will come after destroying the temple, after the Messiah is cut off. And the Messiah gets cut off on Nisan 14 of 32 AD. And at some point in time after that, the Antichrist comes. And we find out that what? In verse 27, we find out that the Antichrist shall confirm the covenant with many for how long?
1 week,
1 week. And how long is that week period of time?
7 years.
So it's one shaboom, 1 unit of 7, 1 week of years. That's the final 7 years of the what?
70 weeks of Daniel.
The 70 weeks of Daniel. 70 weeks of years gives us 490 years. But we find out that that 490 prophetic years is not, starts with a C,
Contiguous.
it's not contiguous, meaning it doesn't run one right after another. The first 69 weeks of years happen to be contiguous, meaning they ran one right after another, after another, after another. We know that the entire 70 weeks of years is not contiguous. Why?
Because the kingdom of heaven hasn't been established on earth. Everything in
Right.
Daniel 29:24 hasn't happened.
That's right. So if the first 69 weeks of years is completed on Nisan 10 of 32 AD, then that means at the end of 70 contiguous weeks of years, or 490 years, it would have been 39 AD when the kingdom of heaven would have had to have come in and be established on the earth, and all sin on earth would end in 39 AD. Sin did not end on earth in 39 AD. The kingdom of heaven, despite what the Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you, the kingdom of heaven was not established on the earth in 39 AD or 1975 or any other year. The kingdom of heaven, by the way, if you turn on TV today, and if you turn on the ESPY Awards last night and saw Bruce Jenner being praised and hailed as some wonderful champion of the people, you would realize that the kingdom of heaven is not reigning upon the earth, but that wickedness and an abomination in the eyes of the Lord is being promoted by our pop culture, controlled by the entertainment industry, and cooperation with our governments and our court systems. So we can't say in any way that the kingdom of heaven has been established on earth. It has not. So therefore, we know that the 490 prophetic years that we have referred to here has to be divided out into two sections. The first 69 weeks of the years, and the final week, which we find referenced when Phil read Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, that final week of years where the Antichrist will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week of years. The last 7-year period of time will be when a peace treaty is confirmed, but in the middle of the 7 years, the peace treaty will be violated and done away with. So, what we find out is that 69 weeks of years is separated from the 70th week of years. And it's separated by what Mark told us was a gap. And that gap has lasted for how long?
2,000 years.
2,000 years. And that gap has been filled by what? What age?
The church age.
The church age. And here it is. The parenthetical period between verse 26 and verse 27 is what? The church age. And we find out that the church age, basically the parenthetical gap, is laid out as verses 26, between verses 26 and 27. Verse 24, 25, 26 gives us our 69 weeks of years, and verse 27 gives us our 70th week of years. You might argue that Antichrist coming after verse 25 is during verse 26. But clearly you have a gap between Daniel chapter 9, verse 25, and Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, which is the 70th week. We have that church age, which now has continued for 2,000 years. So there's a gap between verse 26 and verse 27, and that gap between verse 26, the 69 weeks of years, and verse 27, the 70th week of years, is the 2,000-year church age. The prophetic time clock, if you will, stops running during the church age, because it's the age of grace, right? And it's the amnesty period where all you have to do is repent, apply the blood of the Lamb to the lintel and posts of your heart, and you get eternal life. And because God doesn't want to have to judge sin, the sons of Adam, because he wants them to be saved, he's given us time to share the gospel of Jesus, which we find begins with the resurrection from the crucifixion that occurred on Nisan 14, right? And he rose from the dead, Nisan 17, 3 days later. Now, man can be saved just by believing on Jesus. That's good news. So we don't have to go to hell. He's given us 2,000 years to carry that word to the entire world so that people can get saved. At the conclusion of the church age, what event will occur to end the church age?
Rapture.
The rapture, where the church goes to heaven to be with the Lord. And at that point, the time clock starts again, and the final week of prophetic years begins running again. And how many years later until time is all up?
7.
7 years later, or 1 week of years later, the 70th week of years, the original 70 weeks of years that Gabriel gave to Daniel is now completed. And at the conclusion of that 70th week of years, what has to come in now? Starts with an E. Everlasting righteousness. The kingdom of heaven on earth. An end of sins. All those things that Daniel was told about
24.
in verse 24 of Daniel chapter 9 now comes to pass when we find out what? That the Messiah comes back from heaven, and who comes back from heaven with him?
The church,
Now, how did the church get up into heaven?
rapture.
After the rapture.
After the rapture. When we come back, and now Jesus, is he riding on a baby donkey now?
No more
That's
the white
sad.
horse.
No, my friend, he's on a white horse. And he comes back, he destroys the Antichrist, he throws the Antichrist and the false prophet into
The lake of fire.
the lake of fire.
Fire with brimstone.
That's right, with brimstone. Now, what about Satan? Satan, who is in power of the Antichrist, where does he go?
Go at the bush.
He goes into the bottomless pit, the abyss. And he goes there for how long?
1,000 years.
1,000 years. And so we find out by looking at our color chart that the 1,000-year period of time, which occurs at the end of the church age, here's the 70th week of Daniel here, 70th week of Daniel, at the conclusion of the 70th week of Daniel, the second coming of Jesus Christ with the church. Now he's come a second time. This time as a king, not as a suffering servant, not on a donkey, but on a white horse. He brings the church back from heaven with him for the 1,000-year reign of Christ, the millennial reign on the earth, which is a fulfillment of Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, which Gabriel says would occur at the conclusion of the 70th week, or 490 prophetic years. The 490 years divided out into how many sections?
Two sections.
The first section is how long?
69 weeks of years.
And how many regular years would that be?
483.
Okay, and the second section will be how long?
1 week of years, which be 7 years.
7 years. But they're not contiguous, so from the day that Artaxerxes gave the commandment, 490 years later, did everlasting righteousness come in?
No.
No. 483 years later, what happens?
The gap of the church age.
No, not 480. Well, what significant event occurs
Oh,
to the day 483 years later?
Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday. The Passover lamb is presented, and 4 days later, what happens to the Passover lamb?
Kahat.
He gets cut off, killed. And 3 days after that, what happens to the Passover lamb?
resurrection.
Comes back to life again. And at this point, the church age begins. For 2,000 years it's been going on, and that time is drawing to a close now. At the conclusion of that time, there'll be how much time left on the time clock? The prophetic time clock will start running again at what point?
The rapture.
At the rapture of the church.
Yeah.
And this will be the 70th week of years. This period of time, or this 70th week of years, will be divided out itself into 2 sections. And those 2 sections will be what?
Tribulation and Great Tribulation.
Great tribulation. And what will be the time frame? The first half will be how long?
3.5 years.
And the second half will be.
3.5 years.
And if you looked at it in days, what division of days would that be?
1,260.
Awesome. All right, 1,260 days on the front end, 1,260 days on the back end. If you divided that out into 2 sections of equal months, how many months would it be?
42.
42. So either 1,260 days followed by 1,260 days, or 3.5 years followed by 3.5 years, or 42 months followed by 42 months. And we find out that that's exactly how it's referred to in Scripture. And let's go ahead and look. Daniel's already referred to it in Daniel chapter 2 as a times, and the dividing of time of 3.5 years. But he also has made reference to it as being a period of time of 1,260 days. Now let's take a look by going to, I think, Mark, you're up next. Read for us Revelation chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. It's good that we got a chance to go over this again. We're getting a lot more stuff into it, I think, this week than last week. So that was a mischief the Lord may have allowed to occur for the purpose of getting this absolutely correct. Revelation chapter 11, verse 3, written 600 years after Daniel speaks to Gabriel, while he is imprisoned on the island of Patmos in 96 AD. All of the 12 disciples, except John, have been brutally murdered by the Roman Empire for their faith in Christ. And only John is left alive. He's an old man on the island of Patmos, and then Jesus himself appears and reveals to him what will shortly occur and tells him not to seal up these things because the time is at hand. What is it that Jesus reveals to John in Revelation 11?
There was given me a reed like a rod, and the angel stood saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is outside the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given to the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. I will give power to my 2 witnesses, that they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth.
Now, 1,203 days is a fancy way of saying 1,260 days, which is the same as 42 months. So John is receiving a vision being told that this last half of Daniel's 70th week will be a time when, these terrible things will happen, and it will be, there'll be 2 witnesses that can't be killed, and they're going to prophesy for 1,260 days, and the holy city is going to be tread underfoot for 42 months, or half of the tribulation period. Each half divided out into 3.5 years equal. Now, if you would, Steve, go to Matthew 24 and see what Jesus warned the church about. He had a private briefing with 4 of his most important disciples after he gave a sermon on the Mount of Olives, and this is commonly referred to in Matthew 24 and 25 as the Olivet Discourse, private sort of prophetic press briefing to 4 of his most important disciples, Peter, John and James, and Andrew. And Matthew chapter 24, verses 15, 16, and 21, Steve.
When ye therefore,
Well, actually, just read 15 straight through 22.
when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee unto the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time. No, nor shall be.
No.
And it's-
I'm sorry, go ahead. No.
okay. No, nor shall ever be.
Okay. So there you have it. You have the second half of this 70th week of Daniel, which is referred to by Jesus as the Great Tribulation period. He says the worst period of time on earth. And he says that when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let the reader take notice. Go and flee. Don't wait. Don't go back. They would hang out on the rooftop in ancient Israel. They would live in the house. It was much cooler in the evening on the roof because they didn't have AC. So he said, don't go down and get your clothes. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, and what is he talking about?
The Antichrist sitting on the temple and declared himself to be the Messiah.
Right, and Daniel had made reference to this in, the book of Daniel, and I believe that was, is it Daniel chapter 7 or Daniel chapter 8, where he specifically makes reference to that. And so, Jesus is saying, you're supposed to know the book of Daniel. And if you knew the book of Daniel, you would know that Daniel says that the Antichrist is going to commit an abomination that makes the temple desolate.
Mhm.
And that abomination that makes the temple desolate, which I think we find in Daniel chapter
7:25.
Daniel chapter 7, verse 25.
Time and a half.
Read that for us.
And he shall speak great works against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and to think to change times and laws, and they shall be given unto his hand until a times, and the dividing of time.
Okay.
Is that what you want?
There's a specific period where it talks about
Oh, sorry.
makes an abomination. So we went through that a couple weeks ago, and I can't recall what verse that is, but it's in Daniel where the Antichrist makes an abomination that desecrates the temple, and that foreshadowing of that happened shortly after the temple was rebuilt, when one of the descendants or the generals of General or Alexander the Great, remember he divided his kingdom into 4 parts after he died, and one of the generals got the area that included the land of Israel was General who?
Seleucus.
Yeah, General Seleucus took over, and one of his descendants named Antiochus Epiphanes actually went into the temple and desecrated it by slaughtering a pig on the mercy seat, which caused the Jews to have to supernaturally, look to the Lord to get oil, special oil that they only had 1 day's worth, but it had to last 7 days, and that's where we get the celebration of Hanukkah, because God supernaturally extended the oil for the period of time that was necessary to ritually cleanse the temple, and all that occurred. Oh man, what was that, like 70 BC or something like that? Thereabouts, in the 60s or 70s BC, when Antiochus foreshadowed the Antichrist desecration. But basically, what Jesus is saying is that Daniel told you that the Antichrist was going to come and he was going to desecrate the temple. And when you see him doing that, then you know that the Great Tribulation period is about to occur. And we find out that that actually happens at the midway point of the tribulation period. We find that out, from Daniel chapter 7, verse 23 and 25, and Daniel chapter 11, verses 36 through 39, which we'll get to next week when we talk about Daniel. We're going to, let's see. Well, we'll talk about Daniel chapter 11 next week. But Jesus makes reference to this second half of the tribulation period as the Great Tribulation period, which would be the worst time for life on earth. And, he kind of implies, the return of the Nephilim, because he also in Matthew 24 makes reference to it being just like it was in the days of Noah. And in the days of Noah, God had to destroy the world with the flood. Because what? Because the Nephilim had so infected the human race that to preserve the Adamic DNA, he had to preserve Noah and his family by putting them in the ark and wiping out all the other life on earth. So, okay, we know that the Antichrist is going to enter into the temple and desecrate it, and we find that out. But let's go ahead and let's do this. Daniel, let's go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and read, if you would, Ingrid. Steve, that is really, that's your set piece. So go ahead and read for us verses 1 through 4 of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. You think that's a bookmark in the Bible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the new one, man.
Oh, that's right. You got that's the new one. Okay.
Okay. So you said the first 4 verses?
Yep.
Okay. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind and be troubled, neither by spirit nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God.
Okay, and so basically Paul is saying specifically that is going to occur, that the Antichrist is going to enter into the temple, and that he's going to show himself in the temple of God, that he is God, so that he as God enters into the temple of God, showing himself that he himself is God. And the verse in Daniel that Jesus is making reference to is Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, where he's clearly saying there, he's saying, and then he, the Antichrist, shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week shall the Antichrist bring an end to the sacrifice and the offering of the temple that he had allowed Israel to rebuild at the beginning of the 70th week. And then it says, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate. And what is he talking about? He's talking about this abomination of desolation that Paul just told us about. So that at the midway point of the 70th week of Daniel, at the midway point, the Antichrist will go into the temple, Paul says, and declare himself to be God, which is the same type of desecration that Antiochus Epiphanes did when he went into the temple of God and slaughtered a pig on the altar, which made the temple ceremonially and ritually unclean. So Jesus is saying, when you see that, he's really sending this message, not to the church, because the church is going to be in heaven at this point. This is to unsaved Israel that's been left behind, and he's saying, when you see this, you are going to realize that you've made a deal with death, it says in one of the Old Testament prophecies, that this guy who pretended to be a peacekeeper is actually an enemy. Now you got to flee into the mountains of Petra and wait for the Lord to return to save you.
Daniel says in chapter 11:36.
Can you read that for us, Steve?
And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, and that is determined shall be done.
Yeah, it doesn't specifically talk about the abomination of desolation, but I think verse 9, verse 27 talks about the abomination of the temple. So that's why I said 9:27 is what Jesus is really referring to. And we're going to go ahead and we're wrapping it up here. We're going to finish up now. And let's go ahead and we've talked about, the 70 weeks of Daniel. And I said that there's an overarching principle to all of these numerical values being given in the Bible. 70 weeks of Daniel, 70 times 7, giving us 490 prophetic years divided out into 2. It's an interesting thing to note that in Matthew chapter 18, verse 22, Ingrid, if you would read that for us, let's see what Jesus said when he was asked. Now, this is a simple question that it has nothing to do with Bible prophecy, but Jesus is asked, Master, how many times am I supposed to forgive my brother? And Jesus didn't say forgive him every time, He didn't say forgive him 1,000,000 times. He didn't say forgive him trillions of times. He said a specific numerical, mathematical number in Matthew chapter 18. Matthew is the first book of the New Testament, right after Malachi. And verse 22 of chapter 18, Ingrid?
Okay. Jesus said unto him, I say not unto thee, unto 7 times, but until 70 times 7.
Yeah, give us verses 20 and 21 just to give us some context.
For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus saith unto him, I say not unto thee, until 7 times, but until 70 times 7.
Now that is odd, isn't it? Peter's asked, how many times do I have to forgive him? He said, forgive him. How many times? He didn't say, forgive always, which is what the standard Christian response would be. Well, you're always supposed to forgive him. He didn't say that. He said a specific mathematical number. Not 7 times, Peter, but 70 times 7, which is 490 times, which is a magic number. It almost seems like 490, because I think he's foreshadowing, or it's a double entendre, that makes reference to the 70 times 7 from the book of Daniel chapter 9, which gives us 490 prophetic years, at the conclusion of which, hold on a second, at the conclusion of which, what occurs? There's no more forgiveness available. After the 70 times 7, or 490 prophetic years, we are now in what's known as the millennial kingdom. There is no more repenting of sins that makes you saved now. I would argue that that's the period of time where the church age has come to an end, sin has been judged, and in the millennial kingdom it says that sin is going to be judged immediately. Jesus is going to rule with a rod of iron, and he's going to judge sin immediately. It's not going to be delayed, it's not going to be put off, and it's during this period of time that the Antichrist will now be in the lake of fire, but Satan will be held in the abyssal, at the conclusion of which he's going to be released upon the earth for a short period of time during at the conclusion of the messianic period of reign of Jesus on the earth. And all of the kids that are born during that messianic period of time, the millennial reign of Christ on the earth, who pretended to be believers, but who in their hearts really were not, God's going to allow Satan to draw them out and for them to reveal their true natures. And all of those rebels will be destroyed by fire from God out of heaven. So I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard other Bible prophecy teachers talk about it, but I think it's interesting that when Peter asked Jesus, how many times do I forgive my brother? It's 70 times 7, which is 490, which is the same number of prophetic years given to Daniel for everlasting righteousness to come in, But that means that now the church age has ended, the age of grace where there is, you know, forgiveness and redemption just by asking for it, and it's yours. So I don't know necessarily if that's exactly what that means, but I tend to think that Jesus and the Bible, they don't throw stuff in there for free that doesn't mean anything. When he says 70 times 7, I think he's hinting that we should remember back to Daniel chapter 9 and realize that there's only a set period of time for redemption, for forgiveness, for get out of hell free cards, so you passed out. And at the conclusion of that time, even if, you can stand at the great white throne, which occurs at the conclusion of the millennial reign, which comes at the conclusion of the 70 times 7, the great white throne occurs. And at the great white throne, you can repent all you want, but you can't be forgiven. Mark, I think Phil had a question first, and then Mark.
Well, it was not a question, but it was 419 years. It's also the period that God forgave Israel to not put the land in rest. And after these 1490 years, he put them in under bondage by Nebuchadnezzar within 70 years.
You're saying that he gave him 490 years to get the land stuff right, and then after 490 years, that's a good point. He drew the line. That's interesting. There's another interesting reference to 490. That's a good point. Didn't think of that one. He gave Israel 490 years, or 70 units of 7 years, to get the Passover, the Sabbath of the land corrected. And after 490 years of not getting it right, he said, okay, that's it. Judgment. Babylon. That's an excellent point. That's a very good. That's a good observation. So you got the 490 that God gave the land of Israel until he punished them, and then 490 years that he would have to punish them for because of their sin. And then we have this curious thing where Peter asks, how many times do you forgive your brother? And Jesus says, not every time. He just 70 times 7. He didn't say 490. He could have said, forgive him. Well, it seems to me if he was going to say how many, he would say 500 times.
Yeah.
Just round it off at an even 500. He didn't say 500. And he didn't say 490. Why did he say 70 times 7? It's just curious that he would go out of his way to state 490 in such an awkward, weird way. 490 would have been much easier to say. 500 would make a lot more sense. But he didn't. He said 70 times 7, which is the period of time that God gave Israel to repent of the violation of the land, Sabbath of the land. And 490 years, 70 times 7, which is what the penalty period of time in Babylon was. And 490 is the number of prophetic years until everlasting righteousness. So you've got these maybe 4 groups of 490 that have some specific, special meaning. The Bible sort of repeats itself, and there's no reason for us not to understand. And that's why it's awesome when we get together, and 2 are better than 1 because you get a good return value. So you got several brothers and sisters getting together, going over the Word. That's a great observation that I had never even thought of. But I'm going to stick that in my outline. So for the next time, I can get credit. So Mark, I'll put a footnote. Brother Phil, former professional soccer player, came up with this one. Right? It's really good. So, Mark, did you have some hidden
I
observations?
had a question. When we move into the millennial period, we're at that point ruling with Christ? During
Yeah,
that
yeah.
period?
The church is, not the humans that are the tribulation saints that haven't been killed yet. They are being ruled over. They are basically our subjects. We are reigning and ruling with Christ. The tribulation saints that haven't been killed yet enter into the millennium as regular human beings, and they start having kids, and they start raising families just like we're doing now, but only in a perfect, sort of a Edenic planet Earth that's no longer under the curse of sin. And that's why sin is judged immediately. You've got no excuse. There's no Satan running around to corrupt you. There are no demons whispering in your ear trying to stumble you in the Lord. There is no excuse for not being sin-free and righteous. And when sin occurs, it's immediately judged. But death still occurs, it's just a lot less frequent.
But not for us.
No, not for us, the church. We are now in our resurrection, supernatural, Christ-like bodies.
We will be unable to sin at that point, I assume.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Unlike what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach, we're not going to be in a position where we have to struggle against sin and hope that we'll be in a perfected body with a perfected nature, and we will be like Christ. Remember, it says, when you see we're going to be like him, but we'll see him as he really is. We're going to be just like Christ after the rapture. We're going to have a perfected body. We're going to walk through walls, fly through the air, sit down and have dinner. All at the same time.
It talks about us at some point judging angels. Is that good angels or fallen angels?
Well, that's what I was saying a few minutes ago. At the great white throne judgment, Jesus is going to judge all of fallen mankind from all time. And that will occur right here at the conclusion of the millennial reign of Christ. We find out that the great white throne judgment occurs and the wicked dead are judged by Jesus. But the church will be given the privilege of judging the fallen angels and the demonic entities and the Nephilim who are not human, and we're going to assign them a position in the lake of fire. So we see Jesus judging, we're going to be just like Christ. We're going to imitate him.
I thought we were judging regular good angels. Is that possible?
Why would there be a need to place judgment upon a righteous, sin-free angel?
Are angels sin-free then? They're capable of sin, apparently based on the ones that left heaven.
The ones that don't sin are sin-free. The ones that did sin are not sin-free. To state it simply, it says in Revelation chapter 12 or 13 that 1/3 of the angels that Jesus created at the beginning of Genesis, 1/3 of them followed after Satan and decided that they were getting shortchanged and they were being cheated, and they followed after Satan in his mad attempt to wrest the control of the cosmos from God. And the long war against God began, and he had 1 out of every 3 angels, apparently. That's a pretty large number. Quite frankly, it's kind of shocking that 1/3 of the angels would be stupid enough to rebel against their creator and follow after Satan. But that's what occurs. And I believe it's those angels, the fallen angels, that have to be judged. Because Jesus, it doesn't say does it. He judges, he opens the books and judges the fallen Adamic race. And so I think he's handing to us the same type of responsibility that he has. We're supposed to reign and rule in the universe. And so if we're co-regents, if you will, or princelings, if you will, imitating our God and King, he's going to hand over to us responsibility. Just like if you raise a kid and then he grows up and he's old enough to ride a bike on his own, then he's old enough to drive a car by himself, you start giving him responsibility because you want to see him grow up to fulfill his potential. And Jesus wants us to grow up to fulfill our potential. So he allows us to do the same type of judgment that we see him doing. Only he judges human beings. It's not given to us to judge one another. Judge not, lest you be also judged. Right? It doesn't say that we're not supposed to say sin is wrong. It says we can't impose the penalty for sin because we didn't create the human race. They're God's special creation, and since Jesus created us, he's going to be the one that imposes judgment. Angels are not as special and unique as we are. And for the regenerate man who is now Christ-like, we're going to be given the opportunity to impose Christ-like judgment upon the fallen angels who rebelled and followed after. Because certainly they should be judged as well, right? Based on some of them, got women pregnant and got locked up in TARDIS because they were so wicked in advance, and others didn't. So there's going to be different levels of judgment, and we're given divine wisdom to be able to impose it appropriately, which is part of our reigning and ruling stuff. I'm looking forward to that part, especially. Every time I have some kind of demonic trouble, I'm like, Lord, remember this demon to me on the day of the great white throne judgment so that I can personally give it to this guy.
Really good.
So, whenever you feel like you're under some kind of demonic attack, just pray to the Lord, remember this guy, Lord, and give me his name on the last day so that I can look face to face with this guy and give him what he deserves. And they know that you eventually are going to be handed the reins of judgment. Jesus is going to say, you do it. You see what I did. You do the just judgment for these guys. And we're going to get that opportunity. So, with that, that's Daniel chapter 9, the 70th week of Daniel, the greatest prophecy in the Bible, I think. And we fleshed it out pretty good this week. And any other questions or comments, now's the time. So next week we'll finish up Daniel and we'll go into Daniel chapter 11 and 12, and then we'll move on as the Lord leads. But yeah, Daniel, a very important book, man. Getting this in the can, getting it right, great, man. So we got a nice storehouse of information there for the people. And it's encouraging because all of you guys really have learned this material well. And you'll be able to express this material to other people. And this is important. So now the Lord can use you as faithful servants to share the word of God with other people. Whereas if you don't take the time to learn the stuff, you can't use it, right? He's not going to supernaturally make you learn the Bible because you're too lazy to read it. But when we get together on a weekly basis and we come together, you start getting some insights that, man, I didn't get that. Oh, that's awesome. Hey, let me write that one down. Iron sharpens iron, and we learn from one another. We've all had an opportunity to make great. Mark, Ingrid always comes up with something, great. And Steve has the encyclopedic memory of a lot of these verses that sometimes escape me. So this is what we, the church, are supposed to do. We're supposed to get together, and we're supposed to pour over the word, study it, because it gives us these are the weapons of our warfare. And then after we do this together, the church is together. We're not here with unbelievers. That's not what the church is supposed to be. Like 80% of your audience are unbelievers that aren't saved. That's not what the church is supposed to be. That's what the church is. 80 to 90% of the population of any given church on a Sunday, particularly a church like Joel Osteen or Benny Hinn or something, the vast majority of those people aren't even saved. You're sitting there trying to fellowship with unsaved people, and you're trying to use worldly methods to entertain unsaved people, and you're calling that fellowship with the saints. That's not fellowship with the saints. What we're doing, much smaller scale, is not on TV, it's on the internet, but nobody is going to be watching us on, DirecTV or anything anytime soon. But what we're doing is fellowshipping together around the Word, and then the Lord can take what we've learned here to impart to other people. So as I'm standing here talking, this is what Daniel said, you can be standing somewhere a week from now saying, this is what the Word of God says in the book of Daniel. And somebody's going to look at you and go, wow, that's amazing. How'd you learn that? Did you go to seminary? No, I studied the Bible. I get together with other saints, and the Holy Spirit comes amongst us, and He reveals things to us. The secret of the 70 times 7, the 490 significance, which means time is about up. So when we see crazy stuff like we've seen on television all week, disappointing, shocking, and scary for people that aren't saved, for people like me and Mark, it's exciting because we know the time of the end is at hand, which means it's going to be quitting time soon. So he tells me the latest stuff he's seen on the internet that relates to the end of time, and I tell him the latest stuff that I've seen, and we get encouraged by it, not scared or frightened or depressed. Like, oh my gosh, the world is such a mess. I think, oh, that's great. The world is such a mess, but it ain't going to be for long, and then it gets fixed. Mark?
I don't live here, so I don't look out the window all the time, but so it's maybe normal. But while I've been sitting here for the last 20 minutes, I've seen 3 low-flying helicopters go by. I don't know if that's normal or not. Maybe it is, but I'm just keeping my eyes open, that's all.
Well, July 15th had a special significance day.
Like
And,
helicopters flying low.
well, we saw that a
Saw
couple
that,
months ago,
yeah,
right?
months
When
ago,
Steve,
yeah.
myself, Mark, and I don't know who else was with us that night. That was
I'm just keeping an eye out now because of the Jade Hill.
yeah, and that ties in, I think, perfectly into the last day scenario. That's how you nail the rapture. It's about to occur, boys and girls. So we can be excited for that. So, with that being said, Mark, why don't you close us up tonight in prayer? And hopefully-
Lord, thank you once again for the privilege of coming together as brothers and sisters, and we're appreciative of being able to come here and have a nice place and air conditioning and food, and just thank you for that blessing. And it is exciting to see all of these things coming about so quickly in what seems to be the very last days, Lord. And I will say it's very exciting, but sometimes I do get discouraged when I see stuff like Bruce Jenner and the gay marriage. And I know I should be more faithful and appreciative of the fact that you've already prophesied all of this. But it still gets discouraging sometimes to see how evil society is becoming. And I pray that you will just give us strength and love in our hearts and understanding such that we don't get upset and depressed over it, but we just look at you and know that that's supposed to have happened, and you predicted it, but you're still there for us, and you will be victorious in the end. And we just thank you for this time together, and look forward to learning your word again next week. And ask this in Jesus' name.
Amen.
All right. And so with that, next week,